Good afternoon. I think for you, for our audience, will be good evening, everyone. So welcome to today's trial class with Professor Ketsi. My name is Dan, and I will be your moderator for today's session. First, let me share my screen. Now you can see it. Okay. So my name is Dan, and I was saying I will be your moderator for today. We have a very exciting agenda ahead, and it is my pleasure to introduce our esteemed speakers. First, we welcome Professor Antonio Ketsi. He is the full professor of strategic management, entrepreneurship, and digital transformation, as well as the director of our master in digital innovation and new business design. He will open the session with a trial class. Following that, I will deliver a brief institutional presentation. After that, we will be delighted to hear from Mrs. Khám phá, a current student from Vietnam. She will share her personal experience of living and studying at Polimi School of Management. And finally, we are honored also to welcome our VIP guest from Uni Italia, Vietnam. They will provide some valuable information on the visa application process. And for audience that is not from Vietnam, it's optional. You can also decide to leave from that session. So without further ado, I'm pleased to hand over the floor to Professor Ketsi.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a great pleasure. Let me just go for sharing the slides. That's actually not the right presentation, but that will pop up in just a couple of seconds. It's a great opportunity for me to meet you all, even though virtually for now, and to discuss a topic that is actually, I would say, quite in a hype, and it has been so for the last few years. The topic I will be discussing with you all in these upcoming minutes is that of digital transformation. You certainly realize that today digital is kind of a buzzword, so something everybody speaks about, both from a corporate and company perspective, and even from an individual perspective. So everything should be digital, everything should turn into a digitalized process, product, service, application. Again, digital is becoming paramount in today's society. And if you took a look at what happens on LinkedIn, for instance, in the last years, there are so many different job titles related to digital that are being posted recently. A digital innovation evangelist, a digital specialist, avenger, what the hell? I mean, it's really, really a lot, right? So a lot of attention paid to the phenomenon related to digital technologies and digital innovation. I believe that the situation we're living right now is quite comparable with the one we went through some 25 years ago, when there was another technological paradigm that was first developed in the military field. Then it moved to research in universities, and then eventually it was opened up for commercialization. And this was a technological paradigm that attracted a lot of investments. So a lot of companies, a lot of startups popped up like mushrooms in the field. And eventually there was a lot of expectations. I'm not sure whether the chat is able or disabled for you all, but if it is able, then you can post in the chat. We can interact through it. What am I talking about? What do you think I'm talking about? What is the technological paradigm that 25 years ago was opened up for commercialization to the public? Everybody jumped on, and that attracted a lot of investments, a lot of companies entered the field. What I'm basically discussing here is the internet, right? The .com, Many dot-com startups, a lot of investment, a lot of hype. But then some people ask the very simple question, uh, is that creating any value whatsoever? Okay, I'm creating a website, but what's next? How can I create and capture some value out of that? Well, because of that very simple question, the whole bubble burst. A lot of startups went for bankruptcy, a lot of money was lost, and some people even started questioning whether technology, being internet, a new technology, could be indeed relevant for strategy because of the dot-com bubble bursting. Well, I think that 25 years later, we are finding ourselves in a similar condition for what concerns digital. Everybody say digital, everybody use this as either a prefix or a suffix for any new project they want to be perceived as innovative. But the problem is there's not a lot of consensus on what digital actually means, and just a few people are actually knowledgeable about this technology and its implications. So the interaction we're going to have today will tentatively introduce the subject and will also show as a trial class what we do in our classes at our graduate school of management at Politecnico di Milano, and more specifically in my own international master in digital innovation and new business design, the one I'm directing and I'm giving a few courses in. So I will try to explain what digital may mean and how we should tackle it somehow. And spoiler alert, this is kind of the wrap up for the whole session. When we think of digital innovation, digital strategy, digital transformation, we have to bear in mind that this is not a technological problem. The technology is there. It's complicated as you want, new things emerging, but technology is available. Digital transformation and what it really means must be tackled and must be analyzed from a strategic, organizational, and entrepreneurial perspective. So every time we think of digital beyond the technology per se, we have to think of the implications of such technology for your company's strategy, for your entrepreneurial endeavors, and for your organization. Okay, so this is the standpoint I would like to start with. Just a couple of words about myself. I'm full professor in strategy, entrepreneurship, and digital transformation at our Department of Management and at our Graduate School of Management at Politecnico di Milano. I basically direct or co-direct a number of masters and courses in these topics, including the International Master in Digital Innovation and New Business Design that I just mentioned, and which is your, I guess, your go-to place if you want to deep dive into all of these topics. And I'm also directing two observatories, which means an applied research center that longitudinally focuses on a couple of phenomena, like, for instance, high-tech startups. I'm directing the High-Tech Startups and Scale-Up Observatory that since 2012 is monitoring the Italian and international ecosystem for those startups with a highly technological value proposition. On the one hand, we quantify the market value, so how much investment these startups acquire, and on the other, we evaluate how they use that money in terms of generating new strategies and new business models. Also, since 2020, I've been directing the Space Economy Observatory. This is another major trend which deals with the fact that the space market right now is really changing compared with what happened just a few years ago. It was a market that used to be controlled by the public. There were public institutions and entities like NASA in the US that had big budgets. They hired very big companies to launch big projects. Like I have to launch a couple of satellites in orbit. How much will that cost? How long will that take? And typically what happened is that eventually, even though you did not comply with the budget or the timing, the agencies paid anyway, because it used to be a cost plus approach. The agency had to cover all of the company's costs and then guarantee a markup, some margin. Was that efficient from an economic viewpoint? Of course not. So in order to make it more efficient, you turn to the private sector. And who entered in the last years? Who are the companies that entered? Who are the entrepreneurs that entered? I guess you all know about Elon Musk, SpaceX and Starlink, Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin, Richard Branson, Virgin Galactic. So all of these new private companies that are entering the field, not only to take us back to the moon, to take us to Mars, maybe to go for asteroid mining or to create commercial space stations. This is the Star Wars and Star Trek side of space economy, but also to combine space technologies with digital technologies to generate value-added services with an impact on Earth today, something you can use on a daily basis for Earth observation, navigation, telecommunication. So this is what space economy is all about. And I'm mentioning it because it's going to be a huge, huge trend in the upcoming future. This is something that in our master we actually deal with because there are a lot of digital transformations going on in that industry as well. Now, this was not really a premise about myself. It was more of a premise of the context. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn or else, I'll be happy. Now, let's deep dive in the topic. I know I just have a few minutes, but I would like you to get the flavor of what digital transformation is. I always start with this assumption. Digital innovation is just a new form of innovation, right? It's just another way to innovate with different digital means. And innovating for a company is rather complicated. I would even dare say messy, because there's a number of old and new challenges for digital innovation inside well-established companies. If you want to innovate, it is challenging for a few reasons, and I'm listing the main reasons here. Let's deep dive into the most important ones. First of all, if you want to innovate, you want to take something new to a market, you want your customer to adopt a new product, service, or solution, you are basically determining market turbulence. You are changing the rules of the game. You are challenging your competitors. You are triggering some retaliation, some response. And also, because of the use of these digital technologies, there's a difference, or better, it is very difficult to identify the borders of different markets. This is a trend that goes under the name of industry convergence. Today, it is very difficult to understand where a market begins and where it ends. It is like a global melting pot where everybody is competing with everybody because the same technologies are applied. So this means that maybe you are competing with competitors you never heard of. I'm not sure whether you recall what Blockbuster used to be, where you could rent video cassettes to watch movies. Well, Blockbusters didn't really consider Netflix as a threat. They didn't consider that a stable technology, but we all know what happened eventually. So in industry convergence, you are competing with players you didn't even know about, and this is creating complication. Also, for what concerns digitalization, today there are so many different technologies that we make somehow comparable, and we consider under the same umbrella. When we say digital innovation, we are kind of wrapping up so many alternative technologies. For instance, and that's something we all talk about in the last years, AI, artificial intelligence, right? Isn't this a hype? Especially if you focus not just on predictive AI, but also on generative AI, ChatGPT or Gemini, Perplexity, all of these applications. But what is AI after all? AI, in general terms, could be defined as making sure that the machine, the technology, can replicate the functioning of the human brain. You want a machine to function just like the human brain. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, I can hardly tell. There's an ethical debate about this. A lot of people claim that AI will save you because it will just cover the low value added activities so that you can have a lot of free time you can use for high value added activities. Those are the AI optimistic perspectives. But what about the other perspective, which claims that eventually AI, when combined with robotization, will kill million, if not billion, of jobs? So we don't really know what's going to happen about AI, but we have to understand the trend more and more. And let's assume we want to get to AI. How can we get there? Well, if we want to get to strong AI, which means the machine can make complex decisions as if it was a manager or an entrepreneur in a company, if we want to get there, we need to train the machine, right? Ever heard of machine learning? You want the machine to be trained. How can you train a machine? Well, there are a lot of techniques. One actually requires you to feed the machine with a lot of data. Ever heard of big data? Multidimensional data and information coming from virtually anywhere. Okay, so how can you get the data? Well, you can get them from your personal smartphones, your personal devices, or ever heard of Industry 4.0? So if you want to connect all the equipment, machineries, and plants in your shop floor, in your factory, well, that's called smart manufacturing in 4.0. If you want to connect everything inside of a city, that's called smart city, right? So this is the IoT, Internet of Things paradigm, according to which every single object, including this plastic bottle of water, if properly connected with a sensor, can become a source of both static and dynamic data. So IoT means every single physical object will have a digital identity through connection to smart networks, okay? And once you have all of those data, which by the way, may also come from space, satellite constellations are constantly shooting data down to Earth that we can elaborate on and leverage. Where can we store all of those data? Well, in the cloud computing. You don't really care where the data is as long as you can get free access to it anytime you need, okay? And if you want to use all of that data and information to kind of create a digital twin of your world, so a digital replica, a virtual replica of the whole world, well, that's called the metaverse, right? You know, Facebook changed its name to Meta because they are there to tentatively create a virtual world. They're not doing that great, but that's something we can further expand when we attend the same classes and we meet in class in virtually and in Milan, okay? But anyway, the metaverse is another major trend in digital technologies. And if you want to exchange data and information in a secure, safe, and decentralized way, you can leverage the blockchain and follow cybersecurity tenets, right? So what am I doing here with you? I am listing a number of technological ways that we consider as being part of the general digital innovation trend. Okay. When we say digital innovation and digital technology, these are the technologies we consider. And they're also mutually reinforcing and exponential in the sense that if you want to reach strong AI, a thinking machine, you need to combine all of the other technologies I just mentioned. This is fascinating in the one hand, but on the other hand, it is really complicated to manage. It is becoming complicated to manage also for those technology companies selling the technology. If you think of a company globally that sells all of the different technologies I just mentioned, from AI to cloud to blockchain, you can count them in a single hand. Maybe just a few companies have a full end-to-end offer in technology. So if it is complicated for those selling technology as a core business to manage all of this, you can picture how complicated it is if you are on the demand side of technology. So technology is not your core business. Maybe your core business is restaurants, clothes, cars, whatever. So you do something different, but you have to acquire technology. It is extremely complicated for you to manage all of this. And this is creating another challenge that's called information asymmetry. The offer side of technology, those selling the technology to you, know way, way more than the demand side of technology. This may seem something typical in the market, as long as we don't remember that information asymmetries are problematic because they create market failure. Called the theory the market for lemon theory, and it described a condition where the owner of a given technology knows more than the demand of a technology. He made the example of used cars. If I want to buy a used car, I have to trust the seller because I don't really know what happened to that car, right? But if I get a lemon, if I get scammed, next time I will not be willing to pay that much for a used car, or I will simply not even consider the option. I will say, come on, that used car is not relevant to me. I want to go for the safe alternative, okay? So information asymmetries are leading to market failure. Our job here and in the master that hopefully you will attend to is to become more and more knowledgeable about digital technologies and digital transformation so that we can close the gap, so that offer and demand can speak almost at the same level. The demand knows more and more about technology and it doesn't get a lemon, it doesn't get scammed. Okay. Then the list of all of these challenges is pretty long. I don't want to be fully comprehensive and exhaustive. There's just one more thing I want to mention, the so-called not invented here syndrome, which is a paradox in a way, because it affects those companies that are very strong at research and development. According to NIH syndrome, everything your company develops on the inside, so within its own R&D and innovation departments, is trustworthy. I trust it because I know how I developed it. I know who developed it. I know their names, the names of the people working in that department. So everything coming from the inside is all right. Everything coming from the outside, I don't really know. How can I trust it? Who are they? What did they do? How they do it? Are they a startup? Three guys in a garage? So come on. And that's called not invented here syndrome. Everything not coming from the inside is not trustworthy. And if you are suffering from this syndrome, basically you tend to close your innovation process. You don't want to interact with the outside world because you trust yourself alone. And this is perfectly contrasting to the so-called open innovation paradigm. According to open innovation, the most important thing is not just to know things you can develop on the inside. It's not just about the know-how you have, but it's mostly about the know where. You cannot do it all. You have to realize your single company alone cannot do everything. So instead of just nurturing the know-how, your own competences, you have to know where to find the things you need in a broader ecosystem, in a broader market. Maybe what you need is in a startup, in a university, and so on and so forth. Okay? So not invented here syndrome is going against open innovation as a paradigm. All of these challenges eventually call for a change in your strategy and your organization. So the only way to solve the challenges is to change and innovate your strategy and to change and innovate your organization. This is the reason why I told you a few minutes ago that digital transformation is not merely a technological problem, but it's mostly a strategic and organizational one. Just to add another challenge on the table, let's briefly mention this Martech's law, according to which the greatest managerial challenge in the 21st century is that while technology changes exponentially, your organization can only change logarithmically. So there's a growing gap between the pace of technological change and the ability of your organization to embrace such change. And as a result, the greatest managerial challenge, and by the way, that's your challenge because you are the managers and entrepreneurs of the 21st century. Your challenge is to strategically choose which technological changes to adopt. Should I go for AI, for cloud computing, blockchain, cybersecurity, all of them at once? It's very difficult to go for all of them at once. So you must be able to make a priority list. Let's start with this or that. Have you heard of AI first strategies? Well, to some extent, is companies saying all of our investments in technology will be directed towards AI because we believe AI is the next big thing. How can you make such decision? How can you choose which changes to adopt and which to just maybe discard for the moment? Well, that's another major topic that I've been researching on in the last 15 years that I will extensively cover in my master and my courses. That's called experimentation. The only way for you to know what to do is to design and run small scale, low cost, local experiments to gather a feedback from the customer as soon as possible and learn what the customer, what the market feels about your technology and your project. This is the only way to avoid the so-called technology-driven approach, according to which you do something because you can. Okay, let's develop this. Wow, it's cool. And then, of course, I'll find a market for it. Doesn't work like that. If you develop something just because you like it or you can develop it and you forget about your market, nobody will ever acquire it. So you must, of course, develop something, but eventually you must anticipate feedback from customers as soon as possible. And that goes under the name of lean startup approaches. If you look for my contacts on LinkedIn or ResearchGate, you can find a lot of my studies on lean startup approaches that are a systematic way to evaluate your options, okay? So just to wrap it all up, because I know I just have a couple of minutes and then maybe there's also some Q&A on your side. Digital innovation and digital transformation is very challenging. It's really tough because there are a lot of problems. And Basically, these problems are somehow technological, but they are mostly strategic and organizational, which leads to a potential definition for digital transformation that I would like to share with you. Digital innovation is the set of technologies that I mentioned before. So it's the description of all of the technologies that we have at hand today, while digital transformation is the organizational response to the introduction of digital innovation, so digital technologies within your organizational boundaries. If you really want to introduce technology inside of your organization, you have to get the organization ready. You have to prepare the organization and, of course, its people to that change. So you must make changes in terms of culture and values. All of the notions that I'm listing inside of the parentheses are basically topics that will be covered in my master. You have to change the structure. Maybe you introduce an innovation function, a digital function, and so on. You change the governance and the processes, and you change the individual roles. Chief Digital Officer, Innovation Manager, all of these are examples of how you can change your organization, turn it upside down to somehow transform it and enable the proper use of digital technologies. I'm sorry. If you do so, if you prepare your organization through digital transformation, you'll be able to fully execute a digital strategy. So a strategy that fully considers the digital lever to achieve and sustain competitive advantage. So the ability to perform better than your competitors. I know I kind of rushed through things. There's a lot more we could say concerning digital innovation, transformation, and strategy. But again, our goal here was to give you somehow the taste and the flavor of what our lectures are. And in our lectures, of course, I'm talking about my master, but this applies to many other options inside our School of Management. We strive to set up an action learning environment where we first define the topics, we make a lot of examples, but then also we have guest speakers from the industry and we allow you to work on real world cases as well as your own ideas and projects. In my master, eventually the final project work can also be a project of yours that you try to develop with our own support and our company's support through the application of the selection of models and tools that we showcase during the different courses. So to some extent, even though the topic is really broad, my trial class ends here. And if you have any comment or question for me, you can please type that in the chat, or maybe if it's not disabled, you can use the mic as well. In general terms, if you want to connect with me, you have my contacts here, and I'm very happy to be approached by you in the upcoming weeks or months if you need me. Okay, there's a question here. A basic order plan with 30 minutes meeting to record. Okay, then yeah. Dan, let me know whether there's any question or if you need me even farther. But I would say that's all on my side, and I'm really looking forward to meeting you in our classes.
Thank you very much, Antonio. It's 30 minutes only, but it's really a beautiful flavor of your class. And I would also encourage our friends from Vietnam, most of them, to raise your hands if you have questions. We can help you to unmute your mic, or if you want, you can just type in the chat box.
Sure. Absolutely. I went to Vietnam last time in 2017. I'll be very happy to come back. But if you come to Milan first and join our masters, then you can tell me where to go. Because I'll make the list of the places and I visited, and maybe you can suggest even more. This is kind of an off
really.
topic, I know, but
No, the Vietnamese students, they're lovely. Last year, actually, no, this year, I went to Vietnam for educational fair. They sent me a list of nice restaurants. I can share you the list.
thank you. Why not?
Yeah.
Okay.
So any questions for Prof before he leave us here? Okay, maybe if later you have questions, you can always write here and I will help to answer.
Sure.
So thanks
Thank you
again,
very
Antonio.
much then.
I really learned also a lot from your presentation. I agree. I think when you work on an organizational level or systematical level, everything is more efficient with less effort. So this digital transformation is needed for every company.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
It was
you.
a great pleasure. So see you and take care. I'll stop sharing now. Thanks again.
Okay.